Do you believe a forgotten nation can shake the foundations of global power using nothing but trees? This is not a riddle, it is a challenge. And in June 2025, a land once dismissed as dry, poor, and irrelevant dared to answer it with shovels, saplings, and unstoppable faith. The nation was not China, not the United States, not any global superpower. It was Burkina Faso, a country in West Africa long known for drought, conflict, and silence. But in just 60 minutes under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, more than 5 million trees were planted across the nation. No foreign aid, no massive NGO campaign, no billion-dollar budgets. Only ordinary people driven by an extraordinary purpose. But this was more than just an environmental act. It was a political declaration, a spiritual uprising, a message to the world that Africa no longer waits to be saved. It plants its own future. The soil of Burkina Faso did not just receive trees that day, it received a resurrection of dignity, unity, and defiance. So why did this one-hour act terrify international institutions? Why did development agencies begin whispering warnings behind closed doors? Why did some call it dangerous? Because behind every seed was something bigger, a rejection of dependency, a new strategy of survival, a movement growing from below, not imposed from above. Stay with us. Because what you are about to witness is not just about trees, it is about how a barren land became a battlefield of hope, and how in the shadow of global powers, one nation dared to say, "We will not beg, we will plant, and we will rise." As a child of Africa, I have lost count of the times my heart has shattered. My eyes filled with tears, watching our homeland crack under the weight of drought, poverty, and disease. Many nights I asked myself, why must this land suffer so deeply? But today, we no longer have time for sorrow. It is time to rise, to act, to rewrite the future of Africa, one rooted in strength, dignity, and self-reliance. Share this video if you believe Africa deserves its own voice. Comment where you are watching from so we know this continent is not forgotten. Like and subscribe to stand with the rise of a stronger, freer, and more prosperous Africa. It was 9 o'clock in the morning on June 21st, 2025. The national radio broadcasted a single sound, a long, unwavering siren. In that moment, from the cities to the deserts, from the schools to the military bases, Burkina Faso stood still and then moved together. In the dusty squares of Ouagadougou, children held watering cans. In the remote northern provinces, soldiers dug holes under the scorching sun. In the churches, mosques, and ancestral shrines, people offered prayers before placing saplings into the ground. No posters, no politicians giving speeches, only a collective heartbeat echoing through the soil. In exactly 1 hour, 5 million trees took root across 45 provinces. The number itself would have been unbelievable if not for the images that flooded local media and social platforms. A 5-year-old child planting a moringa tree and then bowing in prayer. A village elder in Kosi whispering the name of her unborn grandchild as she pressed soil around a baobab seedling. In the background, the sound of tools, chants, laughter, and something deeper, a sense of sacred duty. But how did this come to be? This was not a spontaneous miracle. It was the culmination of years of groundwork. President Ibrahim Traoré, a former soldier turned symbol of civic revival, had revived the long-forgotten National Tree Planting Day originally started by Thomas Sankara. What began in 2023 as a modest effort, school gardens, community planting zones, had grown into a national ethos, and by 2025 it reached its peak. President Traoré did not watch from a palace balcony. He was in the field sleeves rolled up planting medicinal trees with students. Across the country, eco-leaders, teachers, nurses, village chiefs led local campaigns. They were not appointed for power. They were trained to inspire. Each tree planted was registered on a national green map application. This was not a stunt. It was a system. Satellite imagery from the Ministry of Environment tracked the exact locations. Community stations were set up in 223 zones equipped with water tanks, organic compost, and traditional planting knowledge. Technology met tradition. Youth met elders. Science met faith. This was the day the earth was not only planted but remembered, because for decades the land had been treated as dead. Deserts replaced grasslands. Families fled to the cities. The soil, once the cradle of culture, became a symbol of despair. But on this day, it was reborn. With each seedling pressed into place, a silent promise was made. We are not done. We are not defeated. In Burkina Faso, June 21st is now called Tree Hour. But for those who were there, it is known as something deeper, the hour of rebirth. The hour when an entire nation stood as one. Not with weapons, not with aid, but with roots. And this was just the beginning, because what followed in the next weeks across borders, across beliefs, would prove that 1 hour was enough to inspire a continent. The roots of this campaign go deeper than any shovel could reach. To understand why Burkina Faso planted 5 million trees in 1 hour, you must look back not just in time, but into the soul of a wounded nation. This was not just a project. It was a response to decades of slow violence, not the kind waged with bullets, but with silence, neglect, and abandonment. Over 40% of Burkina Faso lies within the desertification belt. What once were grazing lands and fertile fields have over the years been devoured by heat, wind, and drought. In the northern regions, families speak of dead land soil that no longer responds, that no longer breathes. Every year, thousands of hectares vanish under shifting sands, leaving nothing behind but hunger, migration, and conflict. There is no food to grow, no water to draw, and no reason to stay. Villages emptied, dreams exiled. And yet the world called it natural, climate change, they said. But for the people living it, this was not a theory, it was betrayal. The kind of betrayal that comes when a nation is left to face collapse alone. In the 1980s, Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader whose voice still echoes across the Sahel, warned of this very future. If we do not replant the land will bury us. His vision was bold. But after his assassination, the tree planting dreams were shelved and the focus shifted to short-term aid and foreign loans. The soil remained abandoned until Ibrahim Traoré. When Traoré came to power, he didn't launch flashy reforms. He asked a different question. What gives a people dignity? His answer was not cash or programs. It was land, trees, roots, a return to the ground beneath their feet. Because if you've ever seen your family's field turn to dust, if you've ever watched your neighbors flee because the harvest failed, then you understand. Dignity is not a theory, it is the ability to stay, to stand, to plant. Traoré saw trees not as decoration, but as defense, not just against erosion, but against extinction. Each tree was chosen for its resilience. Moringa, neem, baobab. These were not random choices. These were native medicinal trees, long revered in African tradition, with roots deep enough to resist drought and properties strong enough to restore life. And so the campaign became more than environmental, it became spiritual. In many communities, planting a tree is a ritual. People pray before digging. They speak the names of ancestors. They dedicate saplings to unborn grandchildren. A baobab planted in 2025 might outlive the planter by 100 years, but that is exactly the point. To plant is to believe in a future you may never see. Burkina Faso did not just fight against desertification. It fought against despair, against the idea that nothing could be done, that Africa must wait to be rescued. On that dry land with cracked hands and aching backs, a people remembered something ancient. The power to restore does not come from outside. It grows from within. And so they planted, against the odds, against the silence, against the slow erasure of a people's place on their own land. When President Ibrahim Traoré spoke about the campaign, he did not begin with statistics. He did not list environmental goals or international commitments. He spoke about dignity. He said, no one can hold their head high with empty hands and no ground to stand on. And with that one sentence, he reframed the meaning of development not as charity from abroad, but as rootedness from within. To Traoré, trees are not just tools to fight climate change. They are anchors of identity. They are living declarations that this land still belongs to its people. That no matter how dry, how damaged, or how forgotten, it still carries the promise of rebirth. In Burkina Faso, planting a tree is no longer a government program. It is a civic right. In schools, students are taught how to plant saplings alongside mathematics and reading. Every first grader must grow something, not as a side project, but as part of their moral education. If you can care for a tree, one teacher said you can care for a life. That is the ethic being sown, an ethic that ties land to responsibility, nature to nationhood. But this movement is not confined to the classroom. It spills into temples, mosques, and family courtyards. Religious leaders across the country have declared tree planting an act of worship. In prayer ceremonies, people no longer just pray for rain. They pray for each seedling to take root. They whisper prayers into the soil. They name trees after children. One elder said, "We used to bury our dead. Now we plant our hopes." And those hopes are medicinal, literally. Most of the 5 million trees planted were not chosen at random. They were indigenous medicinal plants, moringa neem, baobab, each one carefully selected for its ability to heal the body and restore the soil. These trees are part of a broader effort to revive traditional African medicine, to reduce dependency on expensive imports, and to reclaim ancestral knowledge that was pushed aside by colonial systems. It is not just about ecology, it is about economy. For the first time, many families are earning income from land once considered useless. Tea leaves, herbal oils, and traditional remedies are being sold to local health centers. And in these transactions, something more than money is exchanged. Pride is returned. One woman in Yaga province said, "We used to walk past this land. It was dead. Now we wake up early to water it. Our children play under the trees we planted." That simple act of seeing value where once there was none is what Traoré calls eco-dignity. The land does not just feed bodies, it feeds spirits, and the deeper the roots, the stronger the people. This is not a romantic story. It is a strategy, and it is working. Satellite data confirms a steady rise in soil moisture in areas with dense medicinal planting. Local health stations report less need for imported drugs. Communities once fragmented by conflict now work side by side in garden cooperatives. This is what dignity looks like when it grows from the ground up. Not borrowed, not begged, planted. In the weeks that followed, the historic planting images of Burkina Faso's tree hour spread like wildfire across West Africa. From Mali to Ghana, from Côte d'Ivoire to Niger, people reposted photos and videos. A clip of a child planting a tree and praying silently went viral, touching millions. The comment that echoed through the region was simple, yet profound. We used to think freedom came from politics, but sometimes it comes from how we cherish a small tree. Universities in Nigeria and community groups in Senegal organized their own one-hour tree campaigns. Students in Côte d'Ivoire began designing herbal medicine gardens based on the Burkina model. Local governments started to inquire about satellite mapping native plant strategies and village cooperatives. Something was happening, and it was bigger than trees. But not everyone was celebrating. In foreign capitals, reports began to circulate quietly at first. European development agencies and large financial institutions started listing Burkina Faso as a non-conforming case. Their concern: this model was spreading without international coordination. It wasn't approved by experts in Brussels or Washington. It wasn't financed by global banks. It was simply working, and that made it dangerous. An internal memo leaked from a European research center warned, if African countries begin implementing large-scale initiatives without external partners, the development aid model may lose its influence. This wasn't about trees, it was about power. Because if Africa can solve its own problems, then who controls the solutions? Soon media outlets in the West began to change their tone. Once hailed as inspirational, the campaign was now framed as unrealistic, unverified, or politically motivated. Some claimed it was impossible to plant that many trees in 1 hour. Others suggested the campaign was propaganda meant to distract from internal issues. Then came the accusations. 2 weeks after Tree Hour, a group of former military officials claimed the campaign was a cover for paramilitary recruitment. According to them, the youth trained to coordinate community planting were secretly being trained for logistics and grassroots mobilization. They called it eco-militia. International media picked up the story. Headlines screamed about the weaponization of ecology. Western embassies issued travel advisories. A small amount of green aid was frozen. Local opposition leaders began demanding investigations. Some radio stations were shut down for allegedly inflating tree counts. The atmosphere turned tense, the line between hope and suspicion blurred, and yet President Traoré said nothing. For an entire week, he disappeared from public view. No press conferences, no responses. The country held its breath. Then, on the 8th day, he reappeared, not in a city, not on television, but in a small village in the Kaya region. He walked into a schoolyard, picked up a shovel, and planted a single baobab tree next to a classroom. He did not speak, but the image went viral. The caption that trended across social media was, "The tree is the answer." Afterward, his office released a document listing all community training activities, inviting international observers to visit any site without notice. They had nothing to hide. The accusations did not stop the people. In fact, they inspired more action. Villages across the country began hosting independent tree hours led by mothers, students, and farmers. As one elder said, "They can question our motives, but they cannot question the trees. They are growing." And so the campaign shifted again, from a national movement to a continental symbol, from hope to threat to proof. So what happens next? After 5 million trees, after global suspicion, after a nation's silent defiance, what does a people do to ensure that this is not just a memory, but a movement? In the villages of Burkina Faso, no one is waiting for instructions. School children continue tending their trees. Women's cooperatives are expanding herbal gardens. Religious leaders still open every prayer service with a call to plant. The people have decided this was never about one day. It was about changing the soil of the future. And the question now is no longer, can it be done, but how far can it go? Independent studies are already showing the ripple effects. Soil moisture is rising. Local health clinics are replacing expensive imported medicines with traditional remedies grown by their own communities. Incomes are increasing. Pride is returning. Dignity is visible. But perhaps the most powerful shift is invisible. It is the shift in belief. The belief that Africa does not need to be saved, that it can save itself, that hope does not come from abroad but grows one root, one seed, one hand at a time from the ground beneath our feet. This is what the campaign was always about. Not trees, not even Traore, but something older, something sacred, the commitment between people and land, the covenant we were born with but forgot in the noise of modern survival. When God created humanity, He did not place us in a castle or a courtroom. He placed us in a garden, and He gave us one task: not to rule, not to dominate, but to care. So when the people of Burkina Faso dig holes and plant trees, they are not just performing civic duty. They are honoring that original responsibility. They are saying, we remember. They are reclaiming the garden. And what about you? Where would you plant a tree today, for whom and for what? As a child of Africa, I have watched my homeland crack under drought, poverty, and neglect. I have felt my heart shatter and my eyes burn with tears too many times. But not today. Today I see a land rising, not through charity, not through protest, but through planting. Share this story if you believe Africa deserves to stand tall on its own. Comment where you are watching from so we know this continent is not forgotten. Like and subscribe if you believe in the rise of a stronger, freer, and greener Africa. Because in a world drowning in noise, it is the silent roots that remind us who we truly are. My name is Alhaji Suleiman. I am a teacher from Kano in northern Nigeria, where the sand often burns hotter than our hopes. For many years, I watched my village shrink, not from war, but from something quieter. The young leave, the land dries, and dreams fade like smoke in the Harmattan wind. But then I heard about Burkina Faso. At first, it sounded impossible. 5 million trees in 1 hour, no media campaign, no United Nations stamp, just people, real people with tired hands and hungry hearts digging into the dust and planting hope. It stirred something in me, not just surprise, not envy, something deeper: recognition, like watching your reflection stand up and walk. This is Africa Rising. I sat with my students the next day and showed them the videos. One boy asked me, "Sir, can we do that here?" And in that moment I realized what this truly was. Not a campaign, a spark. A reminder that even in the most forgotten corners of our continent, dignity is still possible. Progress is still ours to claim. Africa Rising is not a headline. It is a heartbeat. I feel it every time I see a child water a plant, every time I see elders speak about land like it is sacred again. And it makes me dream not for myself, but for a new Africa. In this new Africa, we do not beg for rain, we build systems to store it. We do not import medicine, we grow healing from our own soil. We do not wait for approval from those who never cared. We rise on the backs of our own ancestors and on the shoulders of our children. But the pain is still there. We cannot lie to ourselves. We have lost too much. Too many villages gone. Too many forests turned to bone. Too many generations taught to look outward for answers. It hurts. It burns. But now there is a movement, an awakening. It is not loud. It is not perfect. But it is real. It is Africa reborn. Not in the palaces of politicians, but in the hands of farmers. Not on screens, but in the soil. Not in theories, but in trees. I want this to spread. From Ouagadougou to Nairobi, from Dakar to Addis Ababa. I want young people to feel what I felt, that our power was never taken, only buried. And now we are digging it up. Together. With each tree, with each step, we remind the world and ourselves that Africa Rising is not a miracle. It is a decision. We are the Africa reborn. We are the new Africa. And no one will define us again because now we plant our own future. Africa Rising, Africa Rising, Africa Rising.